What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you may listen. The Volume's YouTube page. Leave a comment, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the page. If you want to listen live, do all of our shows on the Volume. Download the AMP app. We go live all week, all of our shows. You can find all of our content there each and every day. Big show coming up. We got the Combine starting. We got some Russell Wilson allegations out there that he wanted some people fired, and Dan Snyder is in the news again. We will dive into it all. But first, can I tell you about my friends at Gametime? If you have a smartphone, I do right here. With a smartphone, Apple, no big deal. Go to the App Store. Download the Gametime app. It's the fastest growing ticket app in America. In a couple days, I think on Tuesday, I'm going to the Dodger spring training game. And I did that because of my friends at Gametime. And I used the promo code JOHN, that's my name, John, and I got $20 off. So you want to go to a game, you want to go to a concert, you want to go to a comedy show, you want to take your friends, you want to take your wife, you want to take your girlfriend, you want to take your brother, whoever. Use my promo code JOHN, use the Gametime app, download it now, sign up, promo code JOHN, $20 off. If you're going to attend an event, you got to support the show, you got to support the Gametime, fastest growing ticket app in America. They crush it. They have a ton of options. Use the promo code JOHN, John. Do it right now. I don't even need a thank you. Just go, have a good time, and enjoy yourself because springtime is almost here. Okay, football, and more football. Let's dive into the NFL Combine. Last year, remember, it felt like it was going to be the last year in Indianapolis. I've been to the Combine several times in my life. It's a fantastic place to have the Combine. Anyone listening to this in different industries that have been there for conventions, it is set up perfectly, even in the winter, because you never really have to go outside unless you're going to the bars at night, and then you kind of do. But in terms of the Combine, everything you need is all enclosed, connected through hotels into the convention center. It's fantastic. And last year, the Indianapolis held it for a couple more years. I still think it's inevitably going to end up in Los Angeles. But for the foreseeable future, the next couple years, it's going to be in Indy. And a growing controversy right now with the Combine is it had started a couple years ago with Sean McVay. And in fairness, the Rams didn't have any picks. And he's like, me and my coaches are not coming to the Combine. And Mike Silver, a couple days ago, who has a podcast on this network, Open Mike, tweeted out that a lot of people followed them. The Jets, the Packers, the 49ers are not sending coaches to the Combine. And I think someone in the league, starting with the owners and the commissioner and the league office, needs to get a hold of this. Because one of the reasons the NFL has lapped these other sports, basketball, baseball, is because of television. They are the number one television show in America. And the reason coaches in college and in pro football coaches make so much money is because of television and television revenue. And ultimately what this Combine is, and for a long period of time, at least my entire life as a kid, and then once I started working in the league and going to it, the workouts were in the morning. Well, now they flipped it to the workouts being at night. Why? TV. They want to have good television ratings. This is all about TV. And the football coaches, especially the head coaches and the coordinators, are a big, they are major television characters in this whole thing called the NFL. The quarterbacks, the star linemen, the head coaches, the coordinators, they all play a role in the revenue generation that comes from CBS, NBC, ABC. Now, this is on NFL Network. But if I'm the league, I need to kind of nip this in the bud, and I need to do it quick. Head coaches and coordinators, and listen, a lot of coaches, look down upon the scouting community and view some of the stuff that happens there as overrated, especially this Combine. And listen, we can argue that all day long, and I'd even be in agreement in some of their arguments. But when it comes to your presence, there's a reason when we turn on the TV and there's Belichick and there's Pete Carroll and there's Andy Reid, these guys get interviewed and go into the booth with Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah, and they did for years when Mayock was doing it. It's important. Because this football, there's no games happening for a long, long period of time. So your most important events to keep this league rolling are the Combine, free agency, and then the draft. And this is one that's literally televised with the coaches and the general managers in attendance. So when I get Kyle Shanahan, LaFleur, and Salah and all their coaches not attending, like, I got a problem. If I'm the league, I need to figure this out, and I need to mandate these guys come. At least when the workouts. If you don't want to do the media interview, okay, whatever. I don't care. But I need you when the workouts are going on in the facility. Everyone else is there. So this notion that these guys like know something that Andy Reid and Bill Belichick doesn't, I find kind of laughable. And I understand if you go, well, we don't have a first or second round pick. Well, okay, that's fine. You got a bunch of other picks. And part of it, it's not even about the draft. It's about the television show. It's about the revenue generation. It's the reason that Kyle Shanahan makes $13 million because of television. And it's only going to grow if they don't get a hold of this. It's becoming a problem. And this is a major revenue generator for the league. And it's an important time for the league because nothing's going on and they get a major event. So these guys were just the first movers. I think a lot of people will inevitably follow if the league doesn't kind of draw a line in the sand. And I would expect in the next year or two something to happen because I can't have my head coaches not attending this event. Let's talk about the combine for a second because there are positives and negatives with it. From a positive standpoint, like in the NBA, for example, I don't have to give my clients medical information to certain teams. I get to pick and choose where that information goes. In the NFL, the top players all attend the combine and they all receive a long physical from every team in the league. So every team in the NFL gets the medical information for these players, which I don't know in a physical sport where a lot of guys get hurt is very, very important. I don't know what industry you're in, but if your company was going to acquire another company, what's one of the first things you do? You get their books. You get an inside look. Now, just because you see the books of another company, you might be wrong on determining they won't be successful or they will. Just like a lot of doctors, when they get the medical information, say, I would not draft this guy. I think he has an issue with a shoulder, an issue with an elbow, an issue with the knee. And they're proven time and time again to be wrong. And sometimes they're proven to be right. It's all somewhat subjective. They are making educated, I wouldn't even, it's stronger than a guess, but observations based on the information that they get. And the medical is by far the most important. And second would be, while short, the interviews, because first impressions and meeting someone in person matters. I know we live in a Zoom world, but there is nothing like looking someone in the eye, shaking their hand, and having a conversation with them. So all the top players that attend the combine interview with the teams. And this goes back to the coach. Like, if I'm a head coach, even if the guy's a fourth rounder, I would like to introduce myself and meet the guy. And that is what happens during this period of time. You get 15, 20-minute interviews with these guys. Now, ultimately, can I determine good or bad? Is the guy a great guy or not? I already have a lot of the information. I have had multiple scouts for all these top prospects go into their schools, accumulate information, not just on the player, but the person. Because ultimately, we are going to, argue all day long how good a player is, but we're acquiring the human being. We are acquiring the person. And that is a huge part of this combine, getting the medical, and two, just getting a short feel for the human being. Because eventually when I draft that guy, I'll never forget, Jim Washburn used to say, is that, it's so easy for scouts to go, this guy's a great player, because he is. But then the person is very, very questionable. Well, once we draft the guy in the second round or whatever, you get to go, I can't wait to watch this guy play. But then I got to deal with the person Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday to get him ready for Sunday. Like, that's my problem. It's why most of the best teams tend to have, look at the Chiefs, look at the Eagles. Seems like they got a lot of high-level guys. This is a league full of the most talented people at their profession, but also a league full of very, very high-level, high-character human beings. And most of the best teams are inundated and led by those type people. Now, when it comes to the workouts, how important is that? Like Bill Belichick has always said, we don't pay guys on Sunday to lift and jump, right? We play them to play football. But, listen, I'm looking to buy a home right now. And usually if you go on a given street and there's a home that's 1,900 square feet and another home that's 2,300 square feet, the 2,300 square foot home is going to sell for more money, right? Price per square footage is just a natural, like one home's just going to be priced higher. That does not necessarily mean that one home is better than the other, right? You can run a 4.7, and that does not determine whether you're going to have a really good career as a wide receiver, i.e. Keenan Allen is going to have a 10, 12-year career as a very, very high-level player. But it does somewhat determine where you're going to get drafted. This is a marketplace. So if I'm a corner and I run a 4.58, and there's another corner that runs a 4.42, more than likely that guy with a 4.42 is going to go higher. Now, in 5 years, that guy with a 4.42 may have no instincts and not be able to play. But this combine and a lot of these drills and these measurables, like just because you have shorter arms than another center doesn't mean that that center is going to have a longer career. But it does historical comps of certain guys with certain measurables do not typically succeed in the league. So it helps us to get a base case of, well, instead of having to draft this guy in the second, I might be able to get him in the fourth. The draft, and I say this every single year, is a marketplace. It's not taking guys. It's like, where can I acquire this player? As much as I think this guy is going to be a Hall of Famer, right? Like maybe the 49ers thought Brock Purdy's a 10-year starter, but if they would have taken him in the fourth round, it would have been moronic. Why? They got him with the last pick in the draft. It's going back to Mac Jones when the 49ers is like Kyle Shanahan wants to draft Mac Jones number 3 overall. I thought that would have been the dumbest move of all time. And it was proven, hell, they could have just stayed at 12 to get him. So a huge part of the draft, and this is what this combine is the measurables on the field, the running, the jumping, the arm length, the body stuff, the height, the weight, is comparables to previous drafts, and then kind of slotting you and getting an idea where I'm going to have to take this guy probably in the top 40, where maybe I thought I could get him pick 80, or vice versa. I thought I was going to have to take this guy in the second round, but holy shit, he ran slow. I might be able to get him in the fourth. And that's a huge part of really this next week, is kind of start stacking guys based on some of their measurables separate from their on the field ability. You have to determine who you want on your team, but then you have to use the measurables and the tangible stuff that happens over the next week to kind of figure out where you can get a guy. That's what the best GMs do. Let's go to Russell Wilson. And a story came out on The Athletic that was, it was explosive. Now, one thing, if you remember a couple years ago, Russell Wilson, when he was the man of the year, that was before the information on his charity came out that, less than 50% of every dollar that goes into his charity goes to charity. And I saw JJ Watt, I think 97 cents on every dollar that comes into his charity goes to charity. Listen, I don't run a charity, given some over the years, but don't run one. So I was hesitant to jump on Russell's back but just you start looking at some of the other charities, cents per dollar go to charity, is like his ratio was a little low. Who knows? I'm not going to call it a sham, but some shady, it feels like some shady things are going on there. But then this story comes out that Russell Wilson wanted Pete Carroll and John Schneider fired. And if you remember a couple years ago when he won the Man of the Year and was sitting next to Roger Goodell, stories were coming out. He wanted to be like Tom Brady. He wanted to be treated not just like a star, but have people listen to him and let him dictate personnel moves, kind of what Aaron Rodgers was bitching and moaning about. Basically, he wanted to be treated like an NBA star, where when he says jump, management says how high. One thing Russell Wilson just learned is the NFL is not the NBA. It's a management coach-led operation, which happens to be the most pro fans, right? Because the players don't get to do whatever they want, whenever they want. Because I got news for you. Turns out not all players know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to personnel. Why? Because they don't really watch, and it's not really their profession. Their profession is playing. Who was the guy that wanted Russell Westbrook on the Lakers? Oh, his name's LeBron James. How'd that one work out? Not great. So Russell Wilson thought he could go to owner, who, remember, it was the daughter because Paul Allen had passed away, and thought he'd get John and Pete fired. And what he found out was a couple weeks later, he was traded, which based on 1 year could go down. Just based on the 1 year is one of the great trades in the history of the NFL for Seattle, and looks like potentially one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL for the Denver Broncos. But one thing I think Russell Wilson needed, and it was always like no one could ever quantify what his issue was, right? He's not like some raging asshole. He's not lazy. He's not like doesn't care about football. It's just like this guy's really weird and he's sneaky, kind of uses weirdness, even though maybe it's just an enormous ego. It's all about him. Sneaky kind of got some narcissistic qualities. He's just a little out there. But when you kind of put your thumb down and you go, I want these guys gone, like that's a pretty bold play. And it clearly didn't work. Now, one thing when you read the article is it goes into depth about, Jake Heaps, former BYU quarterback, who's like a practice squad guy, who is now Russell's personal quarterback. He wanted him around a lot, the office. I think this one's pretty simple. In most high-level businesses, when you produce as a high level, you get some leeway, right? Colin Cowherd and Dan Patrick can do some things that I cannot. Just like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady get a little leash that Mac Jones and Justin Fields are just not going to get. Welcome to capitalism. When you produce for whoever your boss is, whoever your partner is, they're going to let some shit slide. So I've said this over and over, like having the office wouldn't be that weird if they would have won 12 games and he threw 38 touchdowns. But when he was worse than Geno Smith and the team sucked, having the office was a big deal. Ultimately, the quarterback is going to spend more time watching film, more than likely, than any other player on the team. And probably an equal amount is some coaches on the staff. So having a quote-unquote designated place, whether you want to call it an office or a film room for the quarterback to go, isn't that weird? And depending on the setup of the organization, like a lot of coaches use their meeting room to watch film. So where's the quarterback going to go, right? What if the quarterback coach is using the quarterback meeting room to watch film and Russell didn't have a spot? I don't even think it's that weird. And I've said before, when Peyton Manning got there, he got special treatment back in the day with the Denver Broncos. Same with the Colts, because he was a film junkie, part of life. But when you don't do well, and then everyone thinks you're like a raging weirdo, and that's the problem. So these articles can come out, and Russell immediately, one of the things that jumped out to me in this article is that this offseason, because it started getting so ugly, that he hired a new PR person. It's like, Russell, do you not get it, man? Can you not just be a normal human? Now, going back to him wanting John and Pete fired, the guy that he wanted was Sean Payton. And I was thinking about one comparison that's going to happen over the next 6 months is Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Sean Payton and Drew Brees. One of the things Drew Brees, he's a much better pocket quarterback in his prime than Russell Wilson. Obviously, Russell, in theory, brings a stronger arm, mobility, things that Drew doesn't bring to the table. But I would say, of talking to people that have played with Drew, of just following his career, reading articles about him, just the entire Drew Brees experience, I'd say the number one thing the guy hung his hat on is being a beloved human being inside the walls by coaches, by teammates, by literally everybody that he went to work with. Everyone to a man just swore by the guy. A lot like Tom Brady. They just loved the human being, what he represented from a work ethic standpoint, as a guy, the way he treated people. That I think the best teammates, when someone calls you a great teammate, do you know what ultimately that means? Is especially when it comes to a quarterback, no matter how famous, no matter how rich, he can just kind of act like a normal human when he's sitting there at the locker with me. And that, to me, is the biggest question mark Russell Wilson has moving forward is, can the guy act like a normal person? Because I think once you get to a certain spot of fame and wealth, like if that's who you are, it's kind of who you are, right? Like Tom Brady ultimately can sit down with some of his boys and just kind of slam some beers, right? Drew Brees could clearly just kind of hang out with the guys. Like that is kind of a knock on Russell Wilson that he doesn't have that in the back. So ultimately, like the office and the film room, like whatever. If he was winning, I want my quarterback watching a lot of film. If Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow come to me and go, hey, man, I need some place to watch film. You don't think those organizations are going to put a room together so the guy has a place to be able to watch film and take notes? Of course they are. Whether you want to call that an office, whether you want to call that a bunker, you can label it whatever you want. But Russell's downfall was, one, his ego started outsizing his production. Wanted guys fired. You're not in control, Russell. See ya. Adios. Give us 2 1s. Give us a bunch of players. Give us a bunch of picks. You pay that money. Now your contract is a major albatross if you don't become, I would say, immediately a top 10 quarterback. I can't be paying you these wages and you be the 14th best quarterback. You got to be like the 6th to make it worth it. And this notion of Peyton and Breeze, like a huge reason for quote unquote Peyton and Breeze was Drew Brees the guy. And I don't know if Russell Wilson has that in the bag. So he can deny this stuff all he wants. Like, bullshit, man. We all know what you were doing. And you lost. Sometimes when you make a power play, whether it's a small power play, like, you know, you're an $80,000 employee and the guy you're working for makes $130,000 and you go to the boss and you want him gone and it works, it's a small power play. And some power plays are with guys making $10, $15 million and a quarterback making 40 and he wants to get rid of a guy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it doesn't work, you know, you come at the king, you better not miss, because when you miss, it backfires. And now let's face it, like there's nothing this PR lady. I love PR. This isn't the fucking 1990s. We live in a day and age where there are a lot of just normal people doing content. Like we see the difference between authentic content and authentic people. Like we've never had more examples out there to know what's real and what's not real. So I think he either can change or he can't, and I would bet against it. Okay, last but not least, Dan Snyder. I don't think Dan Snyder ever wanted to sell the team, right? A lot of these recent sales, when you think about it, like the Denver Broncos, what feels inevitably with the Seattle Seahawks, a lot of it is because that the kids of the team, or in that case, the daughters in Denver and the daughters in Seattle, don't like the team as much as their dad, right? Because their dad loved football. It was a passion to them that ultimately became this multi-billion-dollar business. So the Denver Broncos, clearly they're fighting over money, and Seattle doesn't feel as contentious, but it makes sense why those are going to get sold, right? Because, like, say what you want about a lot of kids that run the teams right now around the league. Let's go Jed York or Clark Hunt or Mark Davis. Like, those guys really like football. They like football. Now, are they as good as their dad or their uncle? We can debate that all we want. But those guys have a passion for the sport. Because ultimately, it would make no sense if you liked football to ever sell an NFL team. Like, I know this, speaking like taxes, we're a couple less than 2 months away for tax season. If I made what I made and I was a W-2 employee, I would make a lot less money than what I make as being partners in these businesses and 1099 and not being a W-2 employee. I end up making more money. Now, nothing's guaranteed. I could make zero or I could make millions. Who knows? It's all dependent on how much revenue we can generate, how many deals we can do. But there's a risk involved. And also, when things go well, I benefit from taking those risks, right? When I was a W-2 employee making 80 grand, 100 grand, whatever, I was guaranteed to make that much money. But I knew kind of exactly what, you know, my taxes I was going to get when I lived in California, 40% of it, say, see ya, right? So you would never sell a business that was that big, one, two, that was making that much money, and it's basically a tax haven for all your cash. Because, listen, I'm not trying to act like I feel bad for any of these people that sell a $6-7 billion asset, but the moment you sell the Washington Commanders for $6 billion, you don't take $6 billion home. I saw on the internet, Big Cat a couple days ago was arguing on the internet with one of the dudes at Barstool about, like, are you a millionaire if you make $1 million? Of course you're not, unless you have $1 million in the bank. If you just have $0 in the bank and you have $1 million salary, you are not a millionaire. Depending on what state you live in, you're a 600,000-aire, or potentially, if you're California, probably under 500,000. You know, just, it all depends. So when I sell these teams, I pay an enormous amount in taxes, where you go, well, it's still $3 billion in your pocket. Fine. But it wouldn't be easy for me if I owned one of these teams to just give $3 billion to the government. You know, I'd want to keep that money. And two, ultimately, I would never want to get rid of the team because I love football. I would love running the team. It's an incredible business. It generates, the amount of revenue just keeps going up and up and up. The value of the team keeps going up and up, especially a franchise like the Commanders, who for the last 20 years have mostly sucked, yet their value is arguably $7-8 billion. And this notion that Daniel Snyder is just selling just like the Denver Broncos did or Seattle did, is not the same. Like, I don't think by any means this guy wants to get rid of his team. And I think, I saw Albert Breer was tweeting about this. Like, some people think that, he's kind of doing this to try to play nice and putting it on the market, but ultimately doesn't want to get rid of it. Of course he doesn't want to get rid of it. Now, I think that, are they going to be able, do they have enough evidence on him? Can they force his way out? Because a story was that he's going to refuse to sell to Jeff Bezos, which of course he is. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, and they've been crushing Daniel Snyder for a decade, right? No different than when the Sun sold to this dude from Detroit that was involved in mortgages. He refused, I forget his name, the old Suns owner, Robert Sarver, was never going to send to Bob Iger, because Bob Iger ran Disney, who owned ESPN, and ESPN was shitting on Sarver for years. So he's like, you could offer me double. I'm not giving you the team. So this notion that it's even a story that he's not going to give Jeff Bezos the team, of course he's not. Now, will he be willing to give someone else the team if they hit whatever his, number that he has chosen in his mind that he has to get, whether that's 6 billion, 6.5 billion, 7 billion? Time's going to tell. I would not feel great about it, because time and time again, Daniel Snyder does weird shit. And the one thing he consistently does is, whatever you say, he typically does the opposite. Whatever the consensus is, he's on the other side. So I think this thing could potentially get a lot uglier before it gets decided. And if you told me that, he pulls it off the market or he delays this thing year in, year out, I am fully prepared. So I just do not expect to have some, easy transition from ownership here. I do not see that one coming. But this is a story definitely worth monitoring, and I'm sure some more buzz will come out of the combine. Appreciate everyone listening. Adios.